Jake Morrison stared at the assignment file on his desk screen for the third time. Personal security for an alien diplomat's daughter. He had done this kind of work before, but never with aliens. The pay was good, very good, and that meant something. Was either dangerous or complicated. Maybe both. He pushed back from his desk and walked to the window of his small apartment. Outside, the stars looked the same as always, but everything had changed in the last 5 years. First contact with the Valonians had turned the galaxy upside down. Humans were making deals with aliens, building space stations together, and trying to figure out how to get along with beings from another world. His door chimed. Jake opened it to find Lisa Chen standing in the hallway with 2 cups of coffee and a big smile. "Ready for your big alien adventure?" she asked, walking past him into the apartment. "It's just a job," Jake said, taking one of the cups. "Bodyguard. Work. Same as always." Lisa sat down on his couch and shook her head. "This is not the same as always. You're going to Harmony Point to protect the daughter of one of the most important aliens in the galaxy. The Valonians are warriors, Jake. They have codes and rules we don't understand." Jake had read the files. The Valonians were tall, strong, and proud. They had honor codes that went back thousands of years. Their society was built on strength and loyalty. But the files didn't tell him much about their daily life or how they treated their women. "What do you know about Valonian culture?" he asked Lisa. "It's not much more than you. They're very formal. They bow a lot, take promises seriously, and their women are protected like precious jewels." Lisa sipped her coffee. "The ambassador's daughter is coming to the station for the trade talks. Those talks could change everything between our species." Jake nodded. He knew the basics. Earth needed resources that Velen Prime had plenty of. The Valonians wanted human technology and knowledge. If the talks went well, both worlds would benefit. If they went badly, the Cold War between the species might turn hot. "Why me?" Jake asked. "There are security companies with alien experience." "Because you're good at your job and you don't ask too many questions?" Lisa stood up and headed for the door. "Your transport leaves in 6 hours. Try not to start any wars." After she left, Jake packed his gear. 2 pistols, body armor, scanning equipment, and clothes, suitable for a diplomatic station. He had learned long ago to pack light but pack smart. The trip to Harmony Point would take 3 days, giving him time to study the files about his new assignment. The transport ship was comfortable but crowded. Jake found a quiet corner and opened his electronic files. The subject's name was Zaraki, daughter of Ambassador Veltherin. She was 24 years old in human terms, though the files warned that Valonian age measurements were different from human ones. She had been educated in both Valonian and human subjects, which was unusual for their species. The photos showed a tall, graceful alien woman with dark blue skin and silver hair. Her eyes were large and bright, almost human in their expressiveness. She wore the flowing robes typical of Valonian nobility. But there was something in her posture that suggested strength and independence. Jake studied the security briefings next. There were 3 main threats to consider. First, human extremist. Groups who opposed any alliance with aliens. Second, Valonian separatists who wanted to keep their culture pure. Third, the general chaos that happened when 2 very different species tried to work together in close quarters. The captain announced their arrival at Harmony Point as Jake finished reading. The space station was huge, a joint project between humans and Valonians. It floated in neutral space, belonging to neither world. The design was strange, mixing human efficiency with Valonian artistic curves. Captain John Hayes met Jake at the airlock. He was a solid man in his 50s, with the kind of experience that came from years of dealing with difficult situations. "Morrison, glad you're here," Hayes said, shaking Jake's hand. "The Valonian delegation arrives in 4 hours. We need to go over security procedures." They walked through the station's corridors, which were wider and taller than normal human. Construction. Everything was built to accommodate Valonian height and their formal way of moving. The walls were decorated with art from both species, creating a strange but beautiful mixture of styles. The ambassador's daughter will have her own quarters in the diplomatic section, Hayes explained as they walked. She'll attend all the formal meetings and cultural events. Your job is to stay close, but not interfere with the proceedings.
What?
About the Valonian security? Jake asked. They'll have their own guards, but they requested human security as well. It's a sign of respect and cooperation. Hayes stopped at a door marked with both human and Valonian symbols. This is your room, right next to hers. You'll have access to both quarters. Jake's room was comfortable and functional. The bed was larger than human standard, and the ceiling was higher. Everything was designed to work for both species. He unpacked his gear and set up his equipment, checking communication links and security feeds. 2 hours later, the Valonian ship docked. Jake watched from the observation deck as the alien delegation came aboard. They moved with ceremony and dignity, their long robes flowing as they walked. Ambassador Veltherin was a tall, impressive figure who commanded attention from everyone around him. Then Jake saw her. Zaraki walked beside her father, but she was looking around the station with obvious curiosity. While the other Valonians maintained formal expressions, her face showed interest and wonder. She pointed at things and asked questions, making her father smile. The formal introduction took place in the main conference room. Jake stood at attention as Captain Hayes presented him to the ambassador. This is Jake Morrison, who will provide additional security for your daughter during your stay. Ambassador Veltheron studied Jake with intelligent eyes. You have experience protecting important people? Yes, sir. 5 years in military security, 3 years in private protection. Ambassador nodded slowly. Zaraki's safety is very important to me. She is my only child and heir to significant responsibilities. I understand, sir. I'll make sure she's safe. Zaraki stepped forward then, and Jake got his first close look at her. She was even more striking in person, with a presence that commanded attention. But what surprised him was her smile. It was warm and genuine, not the formal expression he expected from alien nobility. Hello, Jake Morrison, she said in careful but clear English. I am pleased to meet you. I hope we will work well together. Her voice had a musical quality that made his name sound different and interesting. Jake found himself smiling back before he remembered to maintain professional distance. Pleasure is mine, miss. I'll do my best to keep you safe. Please, call me Zaraki. We will be spending much time together, yes? Jake glanced at the ambassador, who nodded approval. Yes, Zaraki. I'll be staying close during your visit. As the formal introductions continued, Jake noticed how the other Valonians treated Zaraki. They bowed deeper to her than to her father. They spoke to her with even more respect than they used with the ambassador. Whatever her status was, it was higher than Jake had been told. The first day passed quietly. Zaraki attended meetings with her father while Jake remained nearby. She was intelligent and asked good questions about human technology and culture. During breaks, she would approach Jake with questions about life on Earth. Is it true that human women choose their own husbands? She asked during one conversation. Yes, that's true. Both men and women choose their partners freely. How wonderful, she said, her eyes bright with interest. Such freedom must make marriages very strong, Jake agreed, not thinking much about the question. It seemed natural to him that people would choose their own partners. But he noticed that some of the Valonian guards exchanged glances when Zaraki asked about human marriage customs. As the day ended, Jake settled into his routine. He would protect Zaraki during her stay, help keep the peace between the species, and go home when the job was done. It seemed simple enough. He had no idea that his answers to her innocent questions were already changing everything. 3 days into the diplomatic mission, Jake had settled into a comfortable routine. Zaraki was easy to protect because she was smart and followed his security advice without complaint. She also continued to ask him questions about human culture, especially about relationships and personal freedom. On Earth, do parents arrange marriages for their children? She asked as they walked through the station's market area. Not anymore, Jake replied, scanning the crowd around them. A long time ago, some families did that, but now people choose for themselves. Even if the choice might hurt their family's status or wealth? Jake looked at her curiously. Love is more important than status to most humans. Zaraki was quiet for a moment, then smiled. Your species is very brave. They stopped at a stall selling earth foods. Zaraki was fascinated by the variety and wanted to try everything. Jake watched her taste chocolate for the first time, laughing at her surprised expression when the sweetness hit her tongue. This is wonderful, she said. Do all humans eat this? Most of us like it, Jake said. It makes people happy. I can see why. She bought several bars of chocolate, ignoring the shocked looks from her Valonian guards. Apparently, impulse buying was not normal behavior for someone of her status. That evening was the formal cultural exchange dinner. Both species would share food, music, and traditions. Jake wore his best-dressed uniform, while Zaraki appeared in a stunning blue gown that seemed to flow like water. The dinner was held in the station's largest hall, decorated with art and symbols from both worlds. Jake positioned himself near the wall where he could watch the entire room. The dinner started well, with speeches about friendship and cooperation. Ambassador Veltherin spoke about the benefits of trade between their worlds. Captain Hayes talked about learning from each other's strengths. During the meal, Jake noticed several Valonians he didn't recognize. They wore simple robes without the decorations that marked diplomatic status. Their faces were hard, and they watched the human Valonian interactions with obvious disapproval. Lisa, Jake spoke quietly into his communication device. We have unknowns in the room. Check the guest list. Working on it, Lisa replied from the security center. The music started after dinner. Human musicians played alongside Valonian artists, creating something new and beautiful. Zaraki clapped with delight at the music, then stood and walked toward the musicians to get a better look. Jake followed at a discreet distance. But he was watching the unknown Valonians more than the crowd. One of them was speaking into a small device, and Jake didn't like the way the others were spreading out through the room. Jake, those unknowns aren't on any list. Lisa's voice crackled in his earpiece. Security is checking their identifications now. Before Jake could respond, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, casting red shadows across the room. People started shouting and moving in confusion. Jake pushed through the crowd toward where he had last seen Zaraki, but she was no longer by the musicians. Zaraki, he called out, but his voice was lost in the noise. Then he heard energy weapon fire from the far end of the room. The unknown Valonians had drawn weapons and were shooting at the ceiling, trying to create more panic. Jake saw Ambassador Veltherin surrounded by his guards, safe for the moment. But where was Zaraki? Jake activated his scanner and searched for her biosignature. The device showed her moving away from the main hall toward the station's botanical gardens. Someone was forcing her to leave. He ran through the corridors following the signal. Behind him, he could hear security forces engaging the attackers in the dining hall. The battle was loud and chaotic, with energy weapons lighting up the darkness. The botanical gardens were quiet and dark. Plants from both Earth and Velen Prime grew together in carefully controlled environment. The air was thick with moisture and the smell of growing things. Jake moved carefully between the trees and flowering bushes. Using his training to stay quiet, he found them near the center of the garden, beside a small pond. 3 Valonian males in dark clothing had Zaraki backed against a large tree. Was trying to stay calm, but Jake could see fear in her eyes. You shame your people by eating with these soft humans, one of the males was saying. Your father has forgotten the old ways. My father is trying to help our people, Zaraki replied, her voice steady despite her fear. These trade agreements will make Velen Prime stronger. Stronger? The leader laughed harshly. Humans will make us weak with their strange ideas about freedom and choice. Our warriors will become soft. Our women will forget their place. Maybe our women don't want to stay in their place, Zaraki said firmly. The leader raised his hand to strike her. Jake moved. He came out of the shadows fast and silent, hitting the first attacker before any of them knew he was there. His military training took over as he fought to reach Zaraki. The Valonians were strong and skilled, but they weren't expecting a human to attack them. Jake managed to drop 2 of them before the leader turned his weapon toward Zaraki. Stay back, human, or she dies. Jake stopped, his hands raised, but his eyes were calculating distances and angles. The Valonian was too close to Zaraki for a direct attack, and his finger was on the trigger of his energy weapon. "Let her go," Jake said calmly. "Your fight is with the Alliance, not with her." "She is part of the problem," the leader snarled. "She talks to humans like equals. She asks questions about their weak customs. She will poison other young Valonians with these ideas." "Ideas about freedom and choice?" Jake asked. "Those aren't weaknesses. They are for warriors." The attacker's weapon started to glow, charging for a killing shot.
Ow.
Jake saw Zariki's eyes widen with fear. Without thinking, he threw himself between her and the weapon. The energy bolt hit him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing into the tree beside Zaraki. Pain exploded through his body, and he could smell his own burning flesh. But he was still alive, and still between Zaraki and her attacker. The leader raised his weapon again, but this time Jake was ready. Even wounded, he rolled to the side and tackled the Valonian around the legs. They went down together, fighting for control of the weapon. Jake was smaller and weaker than his opponent, but he was desperate. The Valonian was trying to kill the woman he was sworn to protect. That made the fight simple. Jake used every dirty trick he had learned in the military, fighting with a savagery that surprised the alien warrior. The weapon went off again, burning a hole in a nearby tree. Jake managed to get his hands around the Valonian's throat and squeeze until the alien stopped moving. Station security arrived just as Jake collapsed. The fight had taken everything he had, and the energy burn in his shoulder was getting worse. The world was starting to go gray around the edges. He felt gentle hands on his face and opened his eyes to see Zaraki kneeling beside him. She had torn strips from her beautiful dress and was using them to bandage his wound. Her hands were skillful and sure, as if she had medical training. "Why?" she whispered as she worked on his injuries. "Why did you do that?" "My job," Jake managed to say through the pain. "No," she said, her voice strange. "This was more than a job." Oh, she said something in her own language then. Words that sounded formal and important. Jake didn't understand them, but they made the arriving Valonian guards stop and stare at both of them. "What did you say?" Jake asked weakly. But Zaraki was looking at him with an expression he couldn't read. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but there was something else there too. Something that looked like wonder and fear mixed together. The medical team arrived and started working on Jake's injuries. As they prepared to move him to the medical bay, he saw Ambassador Velthron arrive with more guards. The ambassador looked at the scene, then at his daughter kneeling beside Jake's stretcher. The ambassador's expression was shocked, as if he was seeing something he couldn't believe. He spoke rapidly to his guards in the Valonian language, and they all stared at Jake and Zaraki. "What's wrong?" Jake asked Lisa, who had arrived with the medical team. "I don't know," she said, looking confused. "But something has them really upset." As the medical team carried Jake away, he saw Zaraki still kneeling by the tree where he had protected her. She was watching him with that same strange expression, and she was still holding the torn pieces of her dress that she had used to bandage his wounds. Jake had the uncomfortable feeling that he was missing something important. Something about the way the Valonians were looking at him and Zaraki. Something about the words she had spoken in her own language. But the painkillers were starting to work, and Jake's last thought before unconsciousness was simple satisfaction. He had done his job. Zaraki was safe. Professor Carl Bennett sat in his small quarters on the EU's Liberty, staring at the alien text on his computer screen. For 3 days, he had been trying to understand what happened during that strange ceremony. Something was wrong. The Valthari were treating Jake differently now. Bennett could not figure out why. He rubbed his tired eyes and took another sip of coffee. The Valthari language was difficult, but he was slowly making progress. Most of their historical records were locked away, but he had managed to access some older documents about their customs and laws. A phrase kept appearing in the texts: Ketsa Morthani. Bennett had seen these words mentioned several times, always in connection with protection and honor. He pulled up his translation software and began working through the meaning word by word. Ketsa seemed to mean protection or defense. Morthani was harder to understand, but it appeared to be related to binding or joining. Bennett frowned as he worked through more examples. The more he read, the more worried he became. Meanwhile, Jake was having breakfast with Zerilyn in the diplomatic quarters. She had been assigned to stay with him constantly since the ceremony, which Jake still thought was some kind of friendship ritual. He found her company pleasant, and she was helping him learn about Velthar culture. "Tell me about your warriors," Jake said, trying to make conversation. The Dakmal seemed pretty angry during the feast. Zerilyn looked uncomfortable. He is taught traditional. He believes in the old ways. He thought your people were weak because you've brought females to important meetings. What do you think? Jake asked. I think your Dr. Hampton is very intelligent. Among my people, females are often warriors too. But Dakmal comes from the mountain clans. They have different ideas. Oh, God. Nodded. Well, I'm glad I could help diffuse that situation. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. Zerilyn's expression became strange. She looked down at her food and spoke quietly. You did more than diffuse the situation, Jake Morrison. What do you mean? Before she could answer, Dr. Lisa Hampton knocked. On the door, she entered looking puzzled. Jake, I need to ask you something. Velthari medical team asked for your complete health records yesterday. They also requested genetic samples. Do you have any idea why? Jake shook his head. Maybe it's part of the cultural exchange, learning about human biology. That's what I thought, but they were very specific about wanting information about your family history and fertility status, it seemed. Personal. Zerilyn stood up quickly. I should go check on the daily schedule, she said, and left the room before anyone could stop her. Lisa watched her go. Jake, something's definitely going. On the way, the Velthari look at you has changed. And Zerilyn barely leaves your side. At first I thought she was just being a good guide, but this feels different. Different how? Like she's guarding you, or like you belong to her family now. Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. That's ridiculous. We just met a few days ago. I know it sounds crazy, but I think we need to talk to Bennett. He's been studying their customs. Maybe he can explain what's happening. They found Professor Bennett in the ship's small library, surrounded by papers and computer tablets. He looked up when they entered, and his expression was grim. Bennett, we need to talk, Jake said. Something strange is happening with the Velthari, and we can't figure out what. Bennett saved his work and turned to face them. Think I know. What's happening, Ann, Jake? You're not going to like it. What do you mean? Bennett pulled up a document on his computer. I've been researching Velthari laws and customs. There's an ancient rule called the Kethsa Morthani. It translates roughly to the protection bond. What's a protection bond? Lisa asked. According to their law, if an unmated warrior physically intervenes to protect an unmated female from harm or insult, he automatically becomes bound to her. It's considered a marriage contract. Jake stared at him. It's impossible. I'm afraid it's not. Look at this. Bennett showed them a passage he had translated. Any warrior who places himself between danger and an unmated daughter of the clans accepts full responsibility for her safety and honor. The bond is sealed when she accepts his protection. The ritual of joining must be completed within 3 days. Ritual of joining, Lisa repeated slowly. Jake, what exactly happened at that ceremony? Jake's face went pale. They had me repeat some phrases. Zerilyn taught me the words. I thought it was just diplomatic language. What kind of phrases? Bennett asked urgently.
Something about accepting responsibility and linking souls.
But she said it was about warriors' code and honor. I thought she meant I was supposed to be her bodyguard or something. Bennett shook his head. Jake, I think you just recited wedding vows. The room fell silent. Jake sat down heavily in a chair. This can't be happening. Can't be married to someone I just met. I don't even speak her language properly. Evidence fits, Bennett said gently. The gifts outside your room, the way everyone treats you differently, the constant companionship, the medical questions. In their culture, you're now Zerilyn's husband. But I didn't know, Jake said. I was just trying to protect Lisa from that aggressive warrior. It was instinct. That doesn't matter under their law, Bennett explained. Intent isn't important. Action is. You protected her. She accepted your protection, and now you're bound. Lisa sat down next to Jake. What happens if he refuses the marriage? Can he get out of it? Bennett's expression became even more serious. Gosh, That's the worst part, according to what I've read. Refusing or dissolving the protection bond is considered the greatest dishonor possible in their society. It would shame Zerlin's entire family and destroy any chance of an alliance between our species. So I'm trapped, Jake said quietly. It gets worse, Bennett continued. I found references to something called the challenge right. If another warrior questions the validity of the bond, they can demand a trial by combat. The winner gets to claim the female and determine her fate. As if summoned by their conversation, the door chimed. Zerlin entered, but she looked different. Her usual, confident demeanor was gone, replaced by nervousness and sadness. I heard voices, she said softly. Are you discussing the Katsamorthani? The three humans stared at her. Finally, Jake spoke. You knew? You knew what was happening. And you didn't tell me? Zerlin's eyes filled with tears. I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid you would refuse the bond and bring shame to my family. Afraid you would hate me for the deception. She sat down across. From him, among my people, the protection bond is sacred. When you stepped between Nekmal and Dr. Hampton, you showed true warrior spirit. My father saw it. The whole council saw it. But I didn't know what I was doing, Jake protested. That makes it more meaningful, not less. You acted from your heart, without thinking of reward or consequence. That is the mark of a true protector. Lisa leaned forward. Zerlin, be honest with us. What exactly is Jake's situation now? Zerlin took a deep breath. In the eyes of my people, Jake Morrison is my husband. We are bound by law and custom. The ceremony made it official. And if I refuse, Jake asked, then I will be cast out from my clan. I will have no family, no home, no honor. But more than that, my people will see humans as oath-breakers. The alliance my father hopes for will die. The room fell silent again. Jake put his head in his hands. How did this get so complicated? I was just trying to do the right thing. There's something else, Zerlin said quietly. Akmal has been speaking to the traditional clans. He claims that your protection was meaningless because humans lack true warrior spirit. He says the bond is invalid. Bennett looked up sharply. What does that mean? It means he will challenge Jake to combat. If the Kamal wins, he can claim me as his own and declare humans unworthy of alliance. If Jake wins, the bond is validated and our peoples can move forward together. Combat? Jake asked. Like a fight to the death? Not necessarily to the death, but until one yields or cannot continue. It is the old way of settling disputes about honor and marriage rights. Jake stood up and began pacing. So let me understand. This. I'm accidentally married to you, and now I have to fight a giant alien warrior to prove I'm worthy of a marriage I never asked for, or else destroy the diplomatic mission and ruin your life. That is an accurate summary, Zerlin said sadly. Lisa and Bennett exchanged worried looks. The situation had gone from strange to impossible. There has to be another way, Lisa said. Some loophole in the law, some compromise? Zerlin shook her head. I could release you from the bond myself, but that would still bring shame to my family and end my place in society. And that Kmal would still challenge our alliance, claiming that humans run from honorable combat. Jake stopped pacing and looked at Zerlin. Despite everything, he had grown fond of her over the past few days. She was intelligent, brave, and kind. The thought of her being cast out because of his ignorance made him angry. What if I choose to fight? He asked. Jake, no, Lisa said immediately. Can't risk your life over this misunderstanding. It's not just a misunderstanding anymore. Jake said, if I back down now, Zerlin pays the price for my mistake. That's not acceptable. Zerlin looked at him with surprise and something that might have been hope. You would fight for me, even though you did not choose this bond? Kethnor arrived on the station like a storm. Jake watched from his medical bed as the Valonian warrior's ship docked. Even through the security cameras, Jake could see that this alien was different from the diplomats he had met. Kethnor was bigger, stronger, and moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. He looks friendly, Lisa said sarcastically as they watched the screen. Jake was sitting up in bed. his shoulder still wrapped in bandages but feeling much better. The doctors had cleared him for light activity, though they weren't happy about him planning to fight anyone. "How much do you know about Valonian combat?" Jake asked. "Not much," Lisa admitted, "but I've been reading their military files. They're strong, fast, and they've been training to fight since childhood. Their warriors are supposed to be the best in the galaxy." "Great," Jake muttered. "I'm supposed to beat one of them with a bad shoulder." The door opened and Zaraki came in, carrying a large bag. She had been visiting Jake every day since. He woke up, bringing him food and teaching him about Valonian culture. Today, she looked worried. "Kethnor has demanded to see you," she said. "He wants to meet his opponent before the challenge. Is that normal? Sometimes warriors like to size up their enemies." Zaraki sat down and opened her bag. "I brought you something." She pulled out a set of clothes that looked like a mixture of human and Valonian styles. The shirt was simple and practical, but the pants were loose and flowing like Valonian robes. "Traditional challenge clothing," she explained. "We're going to fight for my hand according to our customs. You should dress the part." Jake took the clothes and noticed they were well made and comfortable looking. "Did you make these?" "I had them made." The colors represent courage and honor. Zaraki helped him stand up carefully.
Jake, there is something I need to tell you about the
Challenge. What? It is not just about fighting. The challenge tests more than physical strength. Kethnor will try to prove that humans cannot understand Valonian ways. He will say that you are not worthy to marry into our culture. How do I prove that? I am worthy. By showing that you understand what it means to protect someone you love, not just with strength, but with wisdom and heart. Zaraki touched his face gently. Kethnor fights for tradition and pride. You must fight for something stronger. An hour later, Jake was dressed in the new clothes and walking to the station's main meeting room. His shoulder ached, but he could move his arm well enough to fight. He hoped it would be enough. The meeting room had been cleared except for chairs arranged in a circle. Ambassador Veltherin sat on one side with his diplomatic staff. Captain Hayes and several human officers sat across from them. In the center of the circle stood the largest Valonian Jake had ever seen. Kethnor was almost 7 feet tall and built like a professional fighter. His dark blue skin was marked with ritual scars that showed his warrior status. When he looked at Jake, his eyes were full of contempt. "So this is the human who thinks he can steal a Valonian bride," Kethnor said in heavily accented English. "You are smaller than I expected. I didn't steal anyone," Jake replied calmly. "I protected someone who needed help. Protection." Laughed harshly. "You know nothing about protection? I have been trained since birth to guard Valonian nobility. You are just a human with a weapon." Jake noticed that Zaraki was sitting with her father, but she was watching the conversation intently. Her expression was unreadable, but Jake could see tension in her posture. "Tell me, human," Kethnor continued, "what do you know about Valonian honor? What do you know about the responsibilities of marriage to a royal daughter?" "I know that honor means keeping your promises," Jake said. "I know that marriage should be about choice, not duty." "Choice." Kethnor's voice rose. "Valonian women do not need choice. They need strong males to protect them and guide them." "You would fill Zaraki's head with weak human ideas about freedom." "Maybe freedom isn't weak," Jake said. "Maybe it makes people stronger." Kethnor stepped closer to Jake, using his height to try to intimidate him. "Tomorrow, we will see who is stronger. When I defeat you, Zaraki will return to her proper place as my wife. And if you lose, I will not lose to a human." Kethnor's eyes glittered with confidence. "But if the impossible happens, I will accept that the gods have chosen you over me." Ambassador Veltherin stood up. "The challenge will take place tomorrow at midday in the station's main cargo bay. The rules are simple. Combat continues until one fighter surrenders or cannot continue. Weapons are limited to traditional Valonian blades." "I've never used a Valonian blade," Jake said. "Then you will learn quickly, or you will lose quickly," Kethnor said with a cruel smile. After the meeting, Zaraki took Jake to one of the station's training rooms. She had brought a collection of Valonian weapons for him to practice with. "These are training blades?" she explained, showing him a curved sword that felt strange in his hand. They are lighter than combat weapons, but the balance is the same. Jake swung the blade experimentally. It was different from any human weapon he had used. The curve made it good for slashing attacks, but it felt awkward for thrusting. Kethnor has been training with these weapons his whole life, Jake said. How am I supposed to beat him? By fighting like a human, not like a Valonian? Zaraki picked up another blade and showed Jake some basic moves. Valonian combat is formal and traditional. We have rules and patterns that we follow. But humans fight differently. How? You adapt. You improvise. You do things that your enemy doesn't expect. Zaraki demonstrated a complex series of moves, her blade flowing like water. Kethnor will expect you to fight with honor and follow our traditions. Don't. Jake practiced with the blade for several hours. His shoulder protested, but he pushed through the pain. Zaraki taught him basic attacks and defenses, but she also encouraged him to experiment with moves that felt natural to him. Remember, she said, as they finished practicing, this fight is not just about defeating Kethnor. It is about proving that you understand what marriage means to our people. What does it mean? Partnership, protection, putting your mate's happiness above your own. Zaraki looked at him seriously. Kethnor sees marriage as ownership. He thinks a wife should obey her husband without question. You must show that you see marriage differently. That evening, Jake couldn't sleep. He walked through the station's quiet corridors, thinking about the fight ahead. He found himself in the botanical gardens, where he had first protected Zareki. The plants looked peaceful in the artificial moonlight. Having doubts. Lisa's voice came from behind him. Jake turned to see his friend walking toward him. A few, he admitted. You know you don't have to do this. You could forfeit the challenge and go home. And leave Zareki to marry someone she doesn't love. She's an alien princess, Jake. Her life was always going to be about duty, not love. Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking about everything that had happened. When I threw myself in front of that weapon, I wasn't thinking about duty or culture or politics. I was thinking about protecting someone who mattered to me. And now I know why I did it. Jake looked at the pond where he had fought the attackers. I care about her, Lisa. Not because she's a princess or because of some alien marriage law. Because she's intelligent and brave, and she makes me want to be better than I am, even if it means giving up your human life. Maybe I'm not giving it up. Maybe I'm just expanding it. The next morning came too quickly. Jake dressed in combat gear provided by the Valonians. The armor was light but strong, designed to protect vital areas while allowing freedom of movement. The blade at his side felt heavier than the practice weapons. The cargo bay had been cleared and marked with a large circle for the combat area. Hundreds of people filled the observation areas, both human and Valonian. Everyone on the station wanted to see this fight. Kethnor entered the circle wearing traditional warrior armor. He moved with the grace of a trained fighter, his blade already in his hand. When he saw Jake, he smiled coldly. Last chance to surrender, human. Save yourself the pain of defeat. Jake drew his weapon and took his stance. Not here to surrender. Ambassador Velthrin stepped forward to officiate the challenge. This combat will determine who has the right to marry Zareki, daughter of Velthrin. Let the gods judge who is worthy. The fight began. Kethnor attacked immediately, his blade moving in precise, deadly patterns. Jake barely managed to parry the first few strikes, the force of the blows jarring his injured shoulder. The Valonian was faster and stronger than Jake. As expected, but as the fight continued, Jake began to adapt. He stopped trying to match Kethnor's formal technique and started fighting like a human. He used feints and misdirection, attacking from unexpected angles. When Kethnor expected a high strike, Jake went low. When the alien anticipated a defensive move, Jake attacked. Fight with honor, Kethnor snarled as Jake dodged another attack. I am fighting with honor, Jake replied, landing a glancing blow. On the alien's arm, just not your version of it. The crowd was silent, except for the ring of metal on metal. Jake could see Zaraki in the observation area, her hands clenched with tension. She was watching every move, every exchange. Kethnor began to grow frustrated with Jake's unpredictable fighting style. His attacks became more aggressive, but less controlled. The cargo bay was silent for a moment after Kethnor's surrender. Then the noise exploded as hundreds of voices began talking at once. Jake stood in the center of the circle, still holding his blade, trying to understand what had just happened. He had won against all odds. A human security guard had defeated one of the finest Valonian warriors in single combat. But as the reality of his victory settled in, Jake realized this was just the beginning of his problems. Ambassador Veltherin approached him with a formal expression. "Jake Morrison, you have proven your worth in combat. According to our laws, you now have the right to marry my daughter. But do I have the right to choose not to?" Jake asked the question caused a stir among the Valonian observers. Several of them began speaking rapidly in their own language, their voices rising with what sounded like confusion and anger. "What do you mean?" the ambassador asked carefully. Jake looked up at the observation area where Zaraki was sitting. She was watching him with those expressive eyes, waiting to see what he would do with his victory. "I mean that winning the right to marry someone and choosing to marry them are different things," Jake said. "I fought for Zaraki's right to choose her own husband, not for the right to force her to marry me." The cargo bay became completely quiet. Even the humans looked confused by Jake's statement. Lisa was staring at him like he had lost his mind. Who was being treated by medics for his minor wounds, spoke up from where he sat. "I do not understand. You won the challenge. Zaraki is yours by right. She's not mine," Jake said firmly. "She's not anyone's possession. She's a person who should be able to choose her own life." Ambassador Veltherin looked troubled. "Morrison, you are speaking of things that go against thousands of years of tradition. Maybe it's time for new traditions." The ambassador was quiet for a moment, then gestured to the crowd. "Everyone except family and witnesses must leave. We need to discuss this privately." As the cargo bay cleared, Jake saw Zaraki coming down from the observation area. She moved with dignity, despite the obvious tension in the room. When she reached the circle, she looked at Jake with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Kethnor Fairley," she said, "by our laws, we are now truly married." "And what do you want?" Jake asked. "Forget about laws and traditions and political agreements. What do you actually want?" Zaraki was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the diplomats and officials waited nervously for her answer. "I want to choose," she said finally. "For my whole life, other people have decided what I should do, who I should marry, how I should live. You are the first person who has ever asked me what I want. So what's your answer?" Zaraki stepped closer to Jake, her eyes never leaving his face. "I choose you. Not because the law says I must, but because I want to. Even if it means dealing with a stubborn human who doesn't understand half of your customs, especially because of that." Zaraki smiled. "You protect me not because you were ordered to, but because you care about me. You fight for my right to choose instead of just claiming me as a prize. You make me laugh and you answer my questions honestly, even when the answers are complicated." Jake looked around the room at all the watching faces. And everyone else? Are they okay with us choosing each other instead of just following the law? Ambassador Veltherin stepped forward. "This is very unusual. The marriage law has never been questioned before. Maybe that's the problem," Jake said. "Maybe laws that don't allow for choice need to be changed. You would change thousands of years of tradition. Not change exactly, expand." At Zaraki, then back at her father. "What if we created a new kind of marriage ceremony? One that honors Valonian traditions, but also includes human concepts of choice and partnership?" Captain Hayes, who had been listening quietly, stepped forward. "That could work for future diplomatic relationships, too. A way for both species to understand each other's customs." Kethnor, who was still sitting with the medics, spoke up unexpectedly. "I fought Jake Morrison and lost fairly. If Zaraki chooses him willingly, then perhaps the gods approve of this match." Everyone turned to look at the warrior in surprise. Kethnor continued, "I wanted to marry Zaraki because it was expected of me. But watching this human fight for her freedom instead of just claiming victory, I see that maybe there are different kinds of strength." Ambassador Veltherin looked thoughtful. a new ceremony that combines our traditions. It could work, but it would need approval from the Council on Velen Prime. What about the trade agreements? Captain Hayes asked. Will this affect the negotiations? Actually, it might help them, the ambassador said slowly. A marriage that shows both species can adapt and work together could be a powerful symbol of cooperation. Lisa, who had been quiet during the whole discussion, finally spoke up. Jake, are you sure about this? You'd be giving up your life on Earth, would I? Jake looked at Zaraki. Or would I be starting a new life that includes the best of both worlds? Zarakia took his hand. We could split our time between Earth and Velen Prime, learn from both cultures. Help other couples who want to bridge the gap between our species. It won't be easy, Ambassador, Veltherin warned. There will be people from both worlds who oppose this kind of change. Nothing worthwhile is ever easy, Jake said. But if we can make it work, we could help prevent the kind of misunderstandings that led to this whole situation. Over the next few days, the details were worked out. The trade negotiations continued successfully, with Jake and Zaraki's story becoming a symbol of cooperation between the species. Both governments agreed to support their new approach to interspecies marriage. The wedding ceremony took place a week later in the station's main hall, combined Valonian traditions of honor and protection with human customs of choice and partnership. Jake wore formal clothes that mixed styles from both cultures, while Zaraki's dress was a stunning creation that seemed to flow like starlight, instead of just accepting a marriage bond. Both Jake and Zaraki spoke vows that they had written themselves. Jake promised to protect and cherish Zaraki, but also to support her choices and freedom. Zaraki promised to honor Jake's commitment while staying true to her own beliefs and goals. The ceremony was attended by diplomats from both worlds. Also by ordinary people from the station who had followed their story. Even Kethnor was there, having become an unexpected ally in their efforts to create new traditions. During the reception, Jake found himself talking with Ambassador Veltherin about the future. I have given my daughter something I could never give her, the ambassador said. The chance to choose her own path. She's given me something too, Jake replied, watching Zaraki laugh at something Lisa had said. A purpose bigger than just protecting one person. What do you mean? We want to start a program for couples from different species. Help them understand each other's cultures and customs. Prevent the kind of misunderstanding that almost separated us. The ambassador smiled. That sounds like something both our governments would support. 6 months later, Jake and Zaraki were living on a new colony world called Unity, established specifically for interspecies families. The planet was beautiful, with landscapes that reminded Jake of Earth and cities designed using Valonian architectural principles. Their house was built into a hillside, overlooking a valley where human and Valonian colonists worked together on farms and in workshops. Jake had established a security training program that taught both species how to protect each other, while Zaraki worked with the colonial government to create laws that respected both cultures. Do you ever regret it? Zaraki asked one evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. Giving up your old life? Jake put his arm around his wife, careful of the small bump that showed she was carrying their first child. The baby would be the first human Valonian hybrid ever born. And both governments were watching the pregnancy with intense interest. I didn't give up my old life, Jake said. I traded it for a better one, even with all the complications. Political pressure? The people who think we're making a mistake, especially because of those things? Jake kissed the top of her head. Someone has to prove that different species can build a life together. Might as well be us. Zaraki leaned against him, watching the stars come out in the alien sky. Our child will grow up thinking this is normal. Humans and Valonians working together, loving each other, building something new. That's the best gift we can give them, Jake said. A world where choice and love matter more than tradition and duty. As they sat together in the growing darkness, Jake thought about the chain of events that had brought them here. A simple security assignment had turned into marriage, parenthood, and a new life among the stars. He had protected Zaraki without knowing the consequences, but in the end, she had saved him just as much as he had saved her. Sometimes the best relationships really did come from the most unexpected circumstances. And sometimes, when you fought for someone's right to choose, they chose you back. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of the colony settling in for the night. Human voices mixed with Valonian ones, children laughing in languages from two different worlds. It was the sound of the future they were building together, one choice at a time.